A major battle has erupted between the European Union and one of America's largest technology companies. On September 5, 2025, the European Commission announced a significant penalty against Google, imposing a fine of approximately $3.5 billion. This decision came after a lengthy investigation into the company's powerful advertising technology business. European regulators concluded that Google had unfairly used its dominant market position to its own advantage. They found that the company had systematically favored its own online advertising services, effectively pushing competitors out of the market and limiting choices for both advertisers and website publishers who rely on ad revenue to operate their businesses. This wasn't just a simple fine, it was a clear signal from Brussels. The core of the European Union's accusation revolves around Google's control over the entire digital advertising supply chain. The EU's competition authorities argued that Google controls the tools used by advertisers to buy ads, the platforms used by publishers to sell their ad space, and the exchange that connects them both. This gives the company an unparalleled and, in the EU's view, an illegal advantage. Regulators determined that Google abused this position by making it difficult for rival ad services to compete fairly. By allegedly suppressing its competitors, the EU claims Google has distorted the market, ultimately leading to higher prices for advertisers and less innovation across the entire digital landscape. In response to these serious allegations, Google has stated its clear intention to fight back against the ruling. The company has publicly disagreed with the European Commission's findings and announced that it will appeal the decision through the European courts, a legal process that could take several years to resolve. Google maintains that its advertising tools have actually helped lower prices for businesses and expanded options for consumers and publishers across the continent. The company argues that the market remains highly competitive and that its tools are designed to provide the best value and performance, not to shut out rivals who offer different or less effective services for their clients. This action by the EU is not an isolated event, but rather the latest in a series of major antitrust actions taken against American tech giants. Over the past decade, the European Commission has levied tens of billions of dollars in fines against companies like Google, Apple, and others for various violations of the bloc's strict competition laws. These previous cases have dealt with issues ranging from Google's Android mobile operating system to its online shopping services. This history forms a crucial backdrop to the current conflict, highlighting a fundamental and ongoing disagreement between Brussels and Silicon Valley over how the digital economy should be regulated and who gets to set the rules. The news of the massive fine against Google was met with immediate and forceful condemnation from Washington. President Donald Trump, who has consistently portrayed himself as a defender of American business interests, quickly took to his social media platform Truth Social to voice his outrage. He described the EU's action as very unfair and a form of discrimination specifically targeting a successful American company. The president argued that the $3.5 billion fine represents money that would otherwise be invested back into the United States, supporting American jobs and driving economic growth. His strong language set the stage for a significant escalation in transatlantic tensions over technology and trade policy. President Trump's reaction was not just a spontaneous burst of anger, it followed a pattern of his administration's stance on European tech regulation. The White House has consistently argued that the EU's regulatory efforts disproportionately harm U.S. firms and are a thinly veiled attempt to prop up European competitors. Just one day before the fine was announced, President Trump had hosted a dinner with prominent tech executives, including Google CEO Sundar Pichai. During that meeting, the executives reportedly complained about what they see as unfair taxes and regulations in Europe. This context suggests the administration's response was prepared and reflects a deep-seated frustration with the EU's approach to big tech. Adding to the drama, Vice President J.D. Vance and other senior administration officials have echoed the president's sentiments. They maintain that the authority to regulate American technology companies should rest solely with the United States government, not with foreign bodies. This position is rooted in a belief that American innovation is being unfairly penalized abroad. President Trump also referenced other penalties in his statements, including a past Irish court ruling that ordered Apple to pay over $14 billion in back taxes. He framed these actions as a coordinated effort by Europe to extract wealth from America's most successful corporations, demanding that these companies get their money back. The timing of the EU's decision is particularly sensitive, creating an even more volatile situation. The fine was announced just 6 weeks after the United States and the European Union signed a new trade agreement on July 27, 2025, a deal that was intended to de-escalate tensions and foster closer economic ties. Reports suggest that European officials may have intentionally delayed the announcement of the Google fine, fearing it could jeopardize the fragile agreement. Now, with the fine public and the US government threatening retaliation, that carefully constructed diplomatic progress appears to be at risk of unraveling completely, potentially reigniting a trade conflict. In his response to the EU's fine, President Trump threatened to use a powerful tool known as a Section 301 proceeding. This refers to Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, a piece of U.S. law that grants the president broad authority to investigate and retaliate against foreign countries engaging in what are deemed unfair trade practices. If a foreign country's policies are found to burden or restrict U.S. commerce, the president can unilaterally impose trade restrictions, most notably tariffs, on that country's goods. It is often called the nuclear option in trade policy, because it allows the president to act swiftly, and without direct congressional approval, bypassing normal diplomatic channels. A Section 301 investigation would begin with the United States Trade Representative, or USTR, launching a formal inquiry into the EU's regulatory actions against U.S. tech companies. This investigation would seek to determine if the EU's fines and regulations constitute an unfair trade practice that harms American economic interests. The USTR would hold public hearings and gather evidence from affected companies and industries. If the investigation concludes that the EU's actions are indeed unfair, the president would then have the authority to impose a wide range of retaliatory measures. This is the same legal mechanism that the Trump administration used to initiate the trade war with China, demonstrating its potential for massive economic disruption. The potential consequences of such an action could be severe, threatening to ignite a full-blown trade war between two of the world's largest economic blocs. The US and the EU share over $900 billion in annual trade, and a Section 301 action could put much of that at risk. If the US were to impose tariffs, they could be placed on iconic European products such as German cars, French wine and cheese, and Italian luxury fashion goods. In response, the European Union would almost certainly retaliate with its own tariffs on American products, creating a vicious cycle of escalation that would harm businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. This threat places American tech companies in an incredibly difficult position. On one hand, they face increasingly strict regulations and costly fines within the European market, which is one of their largest and most profitable regions. On the other hand, they now face the prospect of their own government starting a trade war, ostensibly on their behalf, which could disrupt their supply chains, increase their operating costs, and potentially lead to them being shut out of European markets altogether. They are caught between a rock and a hard place, facing pressure from regulators abroad and the unpredictable consequences of political retaliation from home. This escalating conflict between the United States and the European Union is far more than just a dispute over a single fine against a single company. It represents a fundamental clash over the future of the digital economy, a clash that has significant implications for everyone, not just those living in the US or Europe. The outcome of this showdown will help determine who sets the global rules for technology, data privacy, and online competition. If the US and EU cannot find common ground, the world could see a fracturing of the internet, where different regions operate under vastly different rules, making it harder for businesses to operate globally, and for information to flow freely across borders. For everyday consumers, the impact of a potential trade war could be felt directly in their wallets. Tariffs imposed by the US on European goods would make those products more expensive for American shoppers. Similarly, retaliatory European tariffs would raise the prices of American goods sold in the EU. This could affect a wide range of products from cars and electronics to food and clothing. Financial analysts have warned that a significant trade conflict could create market volatility and even slow down global economic growth, potentially affecting jobs and investments around the world. The dispute is not just an abstract political battle, it has real-world economic consequences for ordinary people. Furthermore, this situation highlights the growing power that major technology companies hold over our daily lives and the struggle governments face in trying to regulate them. Google's platforms are integral to how billions of people find information, communicate, and do business. The EU's argument is that such immense power requires strict oversight to ensure fair competition and protect consumers. The US administration's response, however, suggests a preference for allowing these companies to grow with less interference, at least from foreign governments. This debate is playing out in countries across the globe as governments grapple with how to balance innovation with regulation. What happens next will be closely watched by governments, businesses, and citizens worldwide. The European Commission appears determined to enforce its laws, with Competition Commissioner Teresa Ribera even suggesting that a structural remedy, such as forcing Google to sell off parts of its ad tech business, might be necessary. Meanwhile, the Trump administration's threat of a Section 301 investigation looms large over the global economy. The world is waiting to see if diplomacy can prevail, or if two of the world's closest allies are headed for an economic collision course. The resolution of this $3.5 billion showdown will undoubtedly shape the landscape of technology and trade for years to come.